Tigers waiting on the snap. They get it. They'll roll right. They'll throw. They'll make the catch. They will score. And LSU wins it.
That crushing loss ultimately cost Alabama a shot at making the college football playoff. But as we've come to find out every first Saturday of November, this is a game that usually provides theatrics and chaos.
These guys are ready to go. They got no choice.
Like LSU, Alabama's margin for error is slim to none. And for the Crimson Tide to get to Atlanta and beyond, that starts with exacting revenge over the Tigers.
I don't know how many of the games we've played with them in the last however many 15 years or whatever that don't have some consequence to the kind of season they have.
Heated rivals meet again. This time, under the lights, in prime time. We're in for another classic in Tuscaloosa.
LSU going for 2 in a row in one of the biggest SEC showdowns of the season. Bryce, Koon, and John Talty here to break down this top 15 matchup between the Tigers and Alabama. Last year, LSU won in the Bayou in a 32-31 overtime thriller. Brian Kelly now trying to become just the 4th coach ever to win back-to-back games against Nick Saban. So let's look at what's at stake for both of the teams here. All sorts of SEC title implications on the line, obviously. But John, we'll start with the Alabama side. It's Nick Saban's birthday week, and with that, he is gifted another round of retirement questions. So how does this game result affect his future with the program?
Yeah, I mean, he's just at that stage of his life where it's always going to come up. So for him turning 72 on Halloween this week, I think it kind of continues to lead to those questions about, how long is he going to be at Alabama? And so I think this is another one of those years where it's a great opportunity, for Alabama to win the SEC West, to make the playoff, but they have to win out at this point after losing to Texas. So I think a win would just push that down the line. I think a loss to LSU in this game would really kind of crank up that conversation and that narrative, looking at, what's the future for Nick Saban should he lose to LSU in back-to-back years, and really put himself in a difficult position to not only win the SEC West, but ultimately to make the playoff this year.
Yeah, and I think for LSU, when you look at, Brian Kelly getting to Atlanta in year one, it's a chance to, continue to build this program. And, it was a massive project when he got down to Baton Rouge, but now a chance to get to Atlanta, 2 times in a row. They're going to need some help. Ole Miss still has that head-to-head tiebreaker over them. LSU fans are going to be massive fans whoever Ole Miss plays the rest of the way. But, if beating Alabama twice in a row isn't really good enough for a lot of this fan base, it's going to be interesting to see, what this fan base wants. A lot of the goals that they had preseason are still in play. Now, they're going to need some help as a 2-loss team and a little bit of chaos if they want to reach the college football playoff. But an opportunity to go to Atlanta is on the line, and then just a chance to, exercise some demons on the road in Tuscaloosa. Yes, they won there in 2019, but that was with kind of a transcendent team. Now you're going into this with a team that's still very, very good, a lot of question marks. But for Brian Kelly, it's another notch in the belt, it feels like, if you can go on the road to Tuscaloosa and beat Nick Saban for a second straight year and really kick things off recruiting-wise and just all together for this LSU program.
This LSU offense, one of the best, if not the best in the country in terms of the advanced metrics. They're scoring at least 48 points in 4 straight games with 500 yards in 7 straight games. Both of those streaks are for the first time in school history. Bryce, how does this offense continue the pace as they head into T-Town?
Well, it all starts with number 5, Jaden Daniels, and a guy that I think a lot of people are really starting to take more serious as a contender to be in New York at the end of the season. Look, Daniels has developed the ability and the willingness to throw the deep ball. We've seen not only Malik Neighbors be that guy, but Brian Thomas as well. Kyron Lacey had a big performance against Auburn a couple weeks ago. So altogether, this offense is going to run through what Jaden Daniels wants to do. It's a veteran offensive line. It's a group that understands what's at stake. But you look at at Neighbors and you look at Thomas, I mean, these are two of the top receivers in the country and two guys that I think, Neighbors already had a really good shot to be one of the top receivers taken next April in the NFL draft. But Brian Thomas has really made himself some money as well, whether he decides to stay at LSU or move on to the next level. So you add that in with a guy like Logan Diggs at the running back position, who's really been a nice story for this LSU offense. I think LSU's offense feels really good coming into this matchup, and it's going to be a strength on strength against a really, really good Alabama defense.
Yeah, this is one of those kind of classic questions. Is can a good defense stop a good offense? Because I think Alabama's defense is improved from last year. We know that they struggled stopping Daniels last year. Nick Saban's talked about it again this week in the lead up to this game. It's a massive challenge for this team. They haven't faced an offense nearly this good all season. They have done well in some of the earlier challenges, Ole Miss in particular, but this is a defense that's going to have its hands full, and they're going to have to find a way to slow down Daniels and at least keep the offense in the game so it has a shot to keep up. But it's a real opportunity, I think, for Daniels. One of the stats that's been going around this week is that should LSU win, to be the first time a quarterback could get back-to-back wins over Nick Saban since Drew Brees back when Saban was at Michigan State. So it's very rare for a quarterback to be able to get 2 in a row against Nick Saban. I think he learns from the mistakes, and last year they clearly did not have a good handle on Daniels. I expect a better game plan this year.
Now, if this one doesn't turn into a shootout, it'll be because of Bama's defense, like you said, John. We can't really say the same about LSU. Its secondary has struggled to defend the pass all year. Now both starting quarterbacks are down, Darian Chestnut and Zy Alexander. So, Bryce, how might Alabama be able to take advantage of this depleted unit?
Yeah, the loss of Zy Alexander right there before halftime of the Army game 2 weeks ago, man, it might have been the biggest storyline coming out of that game. Not having Alexander, it hurts. And so, look, you also lose Mekhi Wingo, a guy that I think was an SEC, all-caliber player before the season and has lived up to that billing so far this year. So there's a lot of question marks. I mean, you're going to have a lot of young, inexperienced guys at the back end of this defense trying to make a name for themselves and really just trying to play, I would say, average football. I mean, this front seven is going to have the tall task of being able to not only contain, a guy like Milroe, but also limit what they do in the run game as well. And, Alabama is not having the run game that I think they've seen over the past decade in Tuscaloosa. But overall, this defense is going to have to step up. I mean, we talk about the offense and everything that's great. This is a championship level LSU offense. This defense, if they can just play average level in this game, you feel good about your chances. But with so many young faces, you mentioned the cornerback's not going to be able to play. I mean, you're going to have a guy like Sage Ryan that has been a kind of slot corner and a safety. He's on the outside. He's your cornerback number one. So there's a lot of question marks to this group. But Brian Kelly did say that, what they have seen from the bye week and what they have seen so far in this week of practice leading up to getting down to Tuscaloosa is, these guys are great athletes. There's a reason that they're at LSU. So the hope is that, the athleticism is something that they can lean on as they continue to learn more of the schematics and continue to do that. It's going to have to be a simple defense, though, to combat what Alabama can do offensively.
It's funny listening to Bryce just how opposite these two teams are, because I think Alabama has a championship caliber defense, and what they need from their offense is average to above average. And that's been at times a challenge. This is a team that, has come out slow pretty much every single game that they have. A lot of punts in the first and second drives of their games, and they kind of put a lot of pressure on the defense. I think with all of the injuries that LSU is dealing with, it's a real opportunity that Alabama has to capitalize on in the passing game. To Bryce's point, the run game has not been particularly effective, certainly not to the way we expect Alabama running backs to be able to perform. They have their moments. They've been able to grind out some games late, but more often than not, it's going to have to be the passing game to be able to will this team to a win. And I think what we could see is maybe similar to the game plan they had against Texas A&M, where they knew, Milroe is going to get pressured. He's going to take some hits. He's going to take some sacks, but they're going to have to take some shots downfield if they're going to win that game. And, Jalen was able to have a pretty efficient game, had some big one to Isaiah Bond. And I think that's what they're going to have to probably try to capitalize on, those mid to long passes to really test these LSU young players and see if they can hold up against some pretty good Alabama wide receivers.
It's so crazy where the bar was and where it is now. Listening to you guys say LSU just needs to play average defense. Alabama just needs to play average offense to stay in this game. But John, if you could pick one player or matchup that's the key to getting a win, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, going off of what I just said, to me, it's Jermaine Burton. He had a massive game against Texas A&M. He had 9 catches for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's really emerged as their top receiver this year. Can be a downfield threat. He's good kind of intermediate routes. I think he's someone that they need to have a big game. They trust him. He plays with a lot of emotion. Sometimes it gets himself in a little trouble. We've seen him get some unsportsmanlike penalties, but I think he's a guy who's going to come out very fired up. Night game atmosphere inside Bryant-Denny. Burton's a guy that I think you feed early on, see if those LSU secondary members can slow them down, see whether they're up to that test. I think Burton's the guy for Alabama if they're going to win here.
Yeah, and for me, when you look at this defense, I'll stay with it. I mean, it's the big storyline. It's the weakness of LSU versus the perceived weakness against Alabama. And the question for LSU fans is, can the Tigers get just enough stops, or can they create the big momentum play? When you go back and look at this team over the course of the early parts of the season, the loss to Florida State, the loss to Ole Miss, the turnover margin wasn't in their favor. When they beat Missouri, you had the Major Burns pick 6 at the end of the football game. Beating Auburn, they had a couple of big turnovers. Now, those are vastly different teams to what they're going to face in Tuscaloosa, but with a defense as many question marks as LSU has, the two things that stand out to me, can some of those scoring drives that Alabama will get, can you change those from 6 points to 3 points? And then the other factor is, can you just altogether get a turnover and negate how many scoring opportunities they get? I think if LSU is going to win this football game, they're going to have to create a little bit of chaos defensively and force Milroe into some situations where, look, at times he has run into sacks. His pocket awareness, I wouldn't say, is something that is necessarily a strength right now. So can you force him into some tough situations and some bad decisions? If they can, with LSU's offense, you feel like that's a recipe for a win.
All eyes will be on Tuscaloosa this weekend, and these guys keeping us up to date with all of it. Thank you, Bryce and John. And for more on the game, be sure to check out Go 24/7 and Bama 24/7 for all your LSU and Alabama football and recruiting news all year long.